The cloud. Oh, well, I am so excited as I was just talking, sharing with, on the previous video that how excited I was for our call this morning, just like how excited I was for our call, because this is Alexander McCoben, who you've already met, who's the CEO of Conscious Capitalism. And it's just what an extraordinary organization. And then this is Abby Schwab, who is this extraordinary, she produces the events that's actually these extraordinary events. I mean, we're doing the time of COVID right now. So how you have pivoted to the online medium to actually support your community. It's just, I should support our community, which is supporting the communities, rippling out, supporting communities, doing very, very significant work. So, so I know we're here to talk about 3 items that I shared beforehand with both you and in the previous video. So but Alexander, I wonder before we get going, if you could share a little bit about conscious capitalism, kind of why this is such a significant movement. You're the CEO of the movement, kind of, and I'm so blessed to we've had a relationship as well. And I shared, we've had a relationship because we've been in a coaching relationship for the last 3 years, in support of your glorious conscious leadership. And I just want to first of all acknowledge the difference that you are making to this organization. You have truly elevated the organization of conscious capitalism, which is doing the work to elevate humanity. So I want to acknowledge you, but I want everybody who meets you to understand the significance of who you are and the work that you do in the world. So in that context, can you share a little bit about how, the impact of what conscious capitalism is about and what it's doing in the world to elevate humanity?
Thank you, Danny. And I really do want to emphasize for everyone watching just how important our relationship has been for my personal development and for conscious capitalism, because you really have helped elevate my leadership in ways that I don't have time to explain right now, but it's really meant the world to me and still does mean the world to me that we have this relationship. And it's just amazing that conscious capitalism brought us together and gave us this opportunity to connect with each other, because it's a movement of business leaders around the world who are improving both the practice and the perception of capitalism to elevate humanity. We are introducing like-minded business leaders who believe in things like having a higher purpose than just making money and creating value for all the stakeholders that they touch, to meet each other, learn from each other, and help amplify their stories to the world so people realize that there are great businesses and great business leaders out there, that this is an incredibly powerful way to change the world, to improve the world, and that more people should go into business in order to solve the biggest problems that the world's facing and create a more flourishing and sustainable future for us.
Yeah. Alexander, could you mention some of the companies that were either engaged in founding conscious capitalism? I'm thinking that some people may not have heard of conscious capitalism, but they will know the companies, the significance of the companies that were involved in either founding or now have come to engage in this ecosystem. And I want, as you mentioned these companies, I want you listening at home to really think about you've all been touched by these companies, and I want you to think about your cultural experience when you walk into any one of these companies, when you're exposed to any one of these companies, what magic you're experiencing because of those companies. And if you're experiencing magic within those companies, it's because they're living conscious capitalism principles. So could you share a little bit more about who those companies are?
So there are some household names in the Conscious Capitalism Network who helped get this started, whether it's Whole Foods Market. John Mackey, the founder and CEO, is on our board still, or the Container Store, the founder and former CEO, Kip Tindall, also one of our founders, is still on the board, or Panera Bread, Ron Shaich, that founder and CEO, has been involved in the movement since the early days and recently joined Conscious Capitalism's board a couple of years ago. And you're right, when you go into those companies, you feel the energy, you feel the culture. And I also want to point out that those are some of the bigger names, but there are so many businesses who are run on these principles, both mid-market and small businesses that people probably have interacted with and didn't even realize, and show just how diverse the companies that practice conscious capitalism can be. It might be a parking company like Laz Parking that you and I know very well, Danny. It might be used car sales in Dallas, or it might be manufacturing or basement sealing out in Chicago, permaseal basements. And that's the beauty of conscious capitalism. It's not restricted to a certain industry or a certain size company. It's about every company and every leader embracing these principles of how to live out the full potential of a free system of economic exchange and create value for everyone.
Well, I tell you, it's really changed my life, and the work that I do. In fact, this, leading well from within is the science and practice of conscious leadership. And when I was invited in 2012 to speak on conscious leadership, by Doug Levy at the time, and Jeff Klein, who's just was a big part of the movement in the early days, and sadly is no longer with us, but he's here in spirit. I was learning about I was teaching about conscious capitalism at the CEO Summit before I even knew what conscious capitalism was. So I actually had the blessing of learning about that. I had the blessing of learning it and teaching it and using my lens of evidence-based medicine to actually kind of look through that lens of science in terms of, why is it, with Raj Sisodia's book, Firms of Endearment. He's one of the co-founders and I believe current co-chair of conscious capitalism. Why is it in his book, Firms of Endearment, where he tracked 28 companies over a 15-year period, how is it that those companies outperformed the market by about 10 to 1? How is that possible? That was the kind of curiosity. How is it possible that these companies who are living into the purpose, that they are, they're living their purpose, they're actually taking all the stakeholders into account, that they're engaging with conscious leadership, transformational development to create thriving conscious cultures that elevate humanity. I mean, that sounds just good enough on the surface, but it's also good for business. So I just wanted to actually call out that it's conscious capitalism. So it's not only a consciousness movement, it's actually a movement that focuses on how do we empower the best of what capitalism has to offer. And when you actually don't have spiritual capital in capitalism, it will eat on itself. It will devour itself. But when you bring consciousness to capitalism, you unlock the best of the creativity of what it has to offer, and you can truly elevate the world in the most creative, dynamic ways. And that's, it's really, that delivers the full promise of what conscious capitalism and the consciousness dimension delivers on the full promise of what capitalism has to offer the world.
That's exactly right. And that's why these companies are so successful. It's not a call for companies to sacrifice profit or say that money is bad. It's understanding that profit is a means to serve a higher end, and that when you actually focus on that higher end, when you focus on creating value for everyone, your customers, your suppliers, your community, that profit will actually follow. And that's why these companies do so well. That's why these principles are so important, because it emphasizes the integration of everything in business and in life.
Yeah, and just as an anecdote, I do a lot of work with healthcare systems. So I've now taken conscious capitalism principles, and I'm introducing healthcare systems to what is the best of these principles have to offer in actually reconnecting with the purpose of patient care. And then the stakeholder orientation, I'll tell you something interesting. For a long time in healthcare, we've run on the triple aim. So it's patient-centered care, cost-effective care, and population-based health. But they're missing a stakeholder. And that's the healthcare provider. So what I talk about is a balanced stakeholder model, because what's happening if you just operate on the triple aim, what's landing up, you get all those, but you're creating an epidemic of burnout. And about 50% of healthcare providers are burnt out because they're being squeezed by their system. And now in a time of COVID, it's even worse. So what I'm going in when I talk about, conscious capitalism, what I'm talking about is the quadruple aim, making sure that that stakeholder is very, very well integrated into the way we think through design. And then, it certainly is about conscious leadership to create healing cultures that can, heal patients and the world. So, oh God, I mean, this is such a rich conversation. Well, how is that for a preamble? And by the way, that didn't emerge in a script. It's emerging from some non-local environment that's coming through us. I feel this conversation is blessed by God, and so we're channeling into that. So, Abby, did you want to add anything? I want to invite your voice, before we go into that, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but Alexander is the pro on this, and I feel like the two of you really covered that.
Yeah, okay.
So thank you for the opportunity, but I'm going to set it as it is.
Well, I'm wondering if you might feel that you now have some content that you can repackage and disseminate somewhere else. I think that
absolutely, yeah. See a podcast coming, pulling this together.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's go into that first part of our conversation. So, Alexander, I want to just kind of talk about our how we're going to serve the exchange community coming up, on December 2nd together. And what you bring to the community, it's not lost on me. I'm going to pull up the agenda for the day. What we've got. Can you see the agenda over here? Yeah, so this is in Session Lab, which is just a very, very, I guess it's a product placement. It's, just very effective in building agendas. So we're starting at 10:30 Eastern, and we're going to do an enrollment. And John's going to start out by, well, actually it's going to be opened by Brother Jer, who's just Brother James, and he's going to be singing a song which we have, kind of as an anthem for this journey. But because it's Awakening Conscious Leadership, the fact that you're there, Alexander, is just like, it brings kind of like a connectivity to the experience. Your participation is significant. It's really significant. So John's going to offer some framing context about the Awakening Conscious Leadership journey. And then I'm going to share kind of like all these synchronicities that are coming to time. Interesting enough, everybody in the, as part of the enrollment and registration package, they're all watching the channel. So we're all in the flow of kind of this magic, arriving to where we are. And then I'm going to acknowledge some very special people in my life. Amanda and Ben Rooker were the team that actually edited my book. They're in the community now. So that's that piece of connectivity. Tabitha Parker is the CEO of the American Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, where I was served as co-chair. And that's the other part. The book is an integration of conscious capitalism and my world of integrative holistic medicine, and looking what is the best of both perspectives as it can be integrated to helping you lead well from within. And the evolution of this book is now the channel Living Well from Within. So it's a beautiful unfolding. So then I'm going to acknowledge also, and I'm going to introduce you. So I just want, right at the beginning, I want them to know kind of my love for you, at that point. And then I've got a dear brother, Dr. Dan Diamond, who brought me into the exchange community. And he's such a soul brother, and we do a lot of our physician well-being programs together. And he's really a big part of actually behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, actually supporting the success of this program. And then I'm going to, be blessed, feel really blessed to acknowledge John. And there's an inner circle that I've taken people through there's been a series of deep dives, five sessions that I've done over the last few months with this inner circle. And that's going to be the core leadership team that's going to hold the energetic residue for the entire thing, because they've already been through the program. It's been like over 3 months with just 3 hours each session. And now it's coalesced into a 2.5 day workshop. And then I'm going to acknowledge Zach and Dill, because they're going to be on here. And by the way, it's not lost on me that Dill's going to be a part of this program, not only to learn more about conscious leadership, awakening conscious leadership, but he's going to be learning the choreography, the magic of the exchange approach, appreciative inquiry approach that's going to enable him and empower him to actually uniquely qualify him to run the teen chapter, because he's going to be replicated in the choreography. He's going to be learning to do this. And not only is he going to be replicated, there are some experts in the community, including Brother James, who's the most experienced. They already do teen facilitation with these choreographies. So how the magic of what's unfolding is so glorious. And then I'm going to lastly pay tribute to my wife, Sue, who will be on the Zoom with Dill upstairs, and just, and share a story with kind of like, and I share a story, Sue's the love of my life, and I feel so blessed. None of this would be happening without her foundational support. And then I'm going to go into the roadmap. And then the first part is, it's a 4-act play. What we're doing is a 4-act play. We're going to start out by priming for learning and growth. Then we're going to go into the science of conscious leadership. And then we're going to go into the key skills to elevate conscious leadership capacity. And then we'll go into the 4th act on the last day is about optimizing transformative conversations. Because if you want to get really simple about this work of leading well from within, it's about optimizing our relationship with ourselves and others. And that optimization resides in conversation. It's what's the quality of our internal conversation, and then what's the quality of our external conversations. And so there's a big part of the way that we're threading kind of how does the world of conscious capitalism, conscious leadership, intersect with the exchange approach that actually empowers conversations that unlock exponential outcomes within the individuals and within organizations at scale. So that's the experience. It's such a powerful integration. And then I'm going to take them next week. We're going to go into a process of choreography of asking the questions, enrolling people in the experience of priming themselves for their learning journey. And it's important actually before you enter a learning journey, it's about priming yourself for the learning journey. So, the questions that we're going to drop people into groups. There's an art of moving people into groups and then out of groups and then creating shares. So these are the questions we're going to ask right at the outset. What story best captures a time in your life where you have created an exceptional learning experience that created a significant leap of growth for you? And it's not lost on me and my family that this is our time. We've never gone through such rapid growth. And then the questions: what qualities do you show up with that best support or catalyze your learning and growth? So we're awakening qualities like openness, kindness, insatiable curiosity, presence, and reconnecting with purpose. All those qualities, do that. And then I'm going to finish off with an active learning cycle, which is a meta level skill. And this is actually important for the work that we're going to be doing with the Senior Leadership Network. What we're going to be doing is there's an active learning cycle. And that's the active learning cycle right here. Oops, let me just.
This is what happens when we record live.
I know.
But
here we are. So essentially what happens is in this active learning cycle, people are going to be having powerful content or experiences, but content and experience alone doesn't create change. And the evidence is that history repeats itself. It is the reflection on the content and experience that does, plus the actions that ensue, that leads to new experiences. That's the active learning cycle. And by the way, that's what I've been saying to people, what I'm sharing in the channel is that for whatever video anybody watches, Amanda Rook is building these active learning cycles into the bottom of each of these videos. So when I'm going to encourage people to go to the bottom of those videos to actually look for this active learning cycle. So what we're doing over here is priming in terms of how would you show up with, there's an attitude of reflection, which is openness, kindness, curiosity, presence, and then that leads into action, leading to new experiences. And that's the upward spiral of growth, which is experience, reflection, action, experience, reflection, action, experience, reflection, action. That's the upward spiral of growth. And the reason why purpose is so powerful, because the purpose and your goals, actually land up curating the content or experiences you want to expose yourself to. So that's where, that's how we kind of wrap that. That's how we wrap that part of the morning. And then we go on a break, and then here's where, in that context, in that flow, this is where we land at 12 o'clock. And we're going to engage in a discussion. And actually, I'd like to bring John into that discussion as well, because through his lens, he's been actually doing the work of appreciative inquiry, which is part of many of the founding stories within conscious capitalism were companies that embraced appreciative inquiry, right? So, it'll thread into a discussion of the mission statement of conscious capitalism, which is we exist to elevate humanity. We exist to elevate humanity. And then talk about the 4 tenets, which you've referenced here, which is higher purpose drives, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. And then I'll talk about, summarize it as leadership's an act of influence. And conscious leadership is an act of influence as tethered to noble purpose. And when you think about that, where do you have influence in your life? This is not every one of you listening, think about where you have influence in your life, and you'll realize that you don't only have this at work. You have influence with your family, you have influence with your friends, you have influence, when you pick up the laundry, the way you touch, the way you interact with somebody, even just, so leadership's not a role, it's a way of being. And ultimately, the awakening of conscious leadership is the awakening of what is the kind of influence I'm having on my environment? Am I showing up as a positive influence, or am I showing up as a negative influence? And it's taking that awareness. It's taking that awareness to actually say, how would I like to show up at my best? Am I showing up as a demand for others, or am I showing up as a resource for them? So that's going to thread into that part of the conversation. And then we're going to send them into a choreography after that, which is called a paired interview. And there's a very specific reason why we're going into interview process. I won't get into that over here. But the 3 questions that they're going to ask before lunch, when they're going to go into these breakout groups, they're going to go in pairs. Why does learning to become a more conscious leader at this pivotal time matter to you, our exchange community, and the world? And I'm thinking for our senior leadership network, just how pressing that question is, because we're in a time of COVID. We're in a time of COVID. We're in a time of awakened systemic racism where the world needs healing from racial justice. And I did a video with Dr. Yvette Miller on that on day 15, where we speak about the importance of that. So there's such need for healing in the world right now. And conscious capitalism is leading because you had a big commitment, around the time of George Floyd and still ongoing, to actually healing systemic racism. And that's a big thread within the conscious capitalism movement. So it's not lost on me how powerful that is. So in terms of awakening, why does it matter to me? So we're starting out, why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to, your communities? Why does it matter to the world at large? And then these next 2 questions, what are your specific goals for advancing your development as a conscious leader? And then what are the community's goals? What results does the community want to see as a result of going through this experience together? So that's gonna be a very rich conversation. First in pairs, and then we'll come out and we'll see what assembles, in the group. And then we will break for lunch at, how perfect is this, Alexander? At 1:30. So you can make your afternoon appointments. That's where you flow in. Do you feel good to go with that?
This looks fantastic, Danny.
Yeah.
Thank you. And actually, to bring Abby in, Abby, I'm curious, you do put on a lot of events with us at Conscious Capitalism. How does this strike you as a structure and a flow?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. And I really appreciate, Danny, I've seen the active learning cycle many times. I've been through the exchange program myself, and just, it was a really good refresher for me as I'm thinking about programming that we're creating, to see that active learning cycle. And I feel like I'm gonna tape that up on my wall next to me to make sure that any of the programming that we're developing, has that active learning cycle involved in it. So I really appreciate that being brought up right here, so I can kind of tap back into it and remind myself of that. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean,
Well,
Danny's a pro in terms of these choreographies. So
well, it's also like, it's not lost on me, the synchronicity that you've been through. You went through they have a foundational 3-day online exchange experience, and that's extraordinary. I mean, that foundational program is extraordinary. And that, by the way, sets the foundation for these deep dives. And there are a number of deep dives, and I'm now slotting into, this is like an advanced program, this deep dive on awakening conscious leadership. So, it's a beautiful segue into, just at a high level, and I'm mindful of our time, and we've got, I just want to kind of bring Dill back in a moment, but this is very much the choreography that we would be looking to. We want to serve the senior leadership network, and maybe, Alexander, if you want to just share who the senior leadership network is, and kind of where we are in the flow together, and what your hopes and aspirations are for potentially this February or March event. And by the way, John Berghoff, who is the leader of the exchange community, is going to help us design that event. And if I don't know where I'm going to be in February or March, health-wise, but he would be. I mean, we would somehow partner anyway. But you are in extremely good hands for him to actually help elevate what you're trying to do.
I absolutely know that's the case. And actually, you're unveiling a lot of things with this channel, Danny. The team movement of conscious capitalism, the senior leader network, which we're not really sharing with anyone else out there, but anyone who's watching this. All right, we're going to give you an insight to what's happening at conscious capitalism that few other people know about right now, which is, in these COVID times, since we haven't been able to put on in-person events, we've been creating a virtual network and means of connecting senior leaders who are conscious capitalists from influential companies to be able to connect with each other, to learn with one another about how to practice conscious capitalism and better understand their stories so we can amplify them to the larger world in more impactful ways. We've been beta testing this idea for the last several months, and we're at a point where we think we're going to be ready to start rolling this out next year to make it bigger, to make it more influential. And Danny you're, as you know, going to be a big part of us constructing a way for the founding members of this network to figure out what this is going to look like, because it's not something that we are just creating from conscious capitalism staff side. It's something that's really being driven and created by conscious capitalist senior leaders themselves. And actually, I'd love to bring Abby in here as well, because Abby is putting the programming together, really incubating this. And so I'd love for you to add on anything else about this, Abby, that you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for a long time we've held this. I mean, Danny, you've been to the CEO Summit. We've held this event called the CEO Summit. This year would have been our 13th year holding that event, and obviously we had to we decided to cancel it. So I think this is really, I think it's relevant to kind of think about this as being the space in between the CEO summits, where we have these senior leaders who are the change makers within their organization. They're the ones who are the levers to make to have the greatest impact on their teams and the culture and the greater community. So being able to create a place and a space for them to connect, instead of having it be see you next year at the next CEO Summit, or the few connections that are made throughout the year, to really have something intentional where those folks can connect. And now that people are so comfortable in the virtual space, it lends itself to being able to gather people in really intentional ways, to create those connections, to help people grow their conscious leadership, and to have that kind of filter down into all of the ways into their businesses and their various stakeholders. So we're really thinking of it as kind of like that network that ties together the relationships and the experience that people are having at the CEO summits, which is something that people have been asking for a long time. So it's really seeing it as an opportunity.
So I think what this up levels, because oftentimes, any conference is traditionally, you have experts on the stage. So it's almost sage on the stage trying to impart wisdom. Or even when you're doing traditional strategic planning, it's coming from the top down. You've got like a small executive committee that's got the strategy and is trying to kind of implement it through. What this methodology is of appreciative inquiry, it's either a 5I cycle or a 5D cycle. So, what we're in the 5D lexicon, we're defining the topic that we want to actually deliver outcomes on. Like, that we need to come up with the generative, like, what are we out here to do? And then, what I've previewed for you, that first part of what I was doing is discovering. There's a discovery process, discovering into purpose. And then there's this thing about, appreciative inquiry is the best of what was, is, and could be. So that question is, where have you had an exceptional learning experience, is an example of a discovering into the past, to then move into discovering the strengths that you currently have. So what you're doing is you're awakening strengths in the system. And then you're going into a dream. You're actually saying, what are we going to be celebrating? And this is going to be said, with this network, what would we be celebrating 6 months from now? What would we be celebrating a year from now, right? And then the cool thing is, when we actually go into a collective dream based on our flourishing strengths, we then get to design and deploy. That's when we get to crowdsource strategy. And it's not really about strategy from the top down. We're crowdsourcing wisdom, because these are very experienced business practitioners. They're very experienced business practitioners. So it would be almost an insult to them to bring them a strategy of what the future of conscious capitalism looks like. Who better to create the future of conscious capitalism than the community stakeholders themselves? So then, and that unlocks their ownership of the experience. And then we'll go into the action step planning, where people go into committees, not because they're actually tasked to, but because they'll vote with their feet and be excited to take ownership of those action steps to manifest that vision. So that's the vision. That's the vision. That's the vision for the senior leadership network. And perhaps it's not only one workshop. Perhaps it's a series of workshops in this way. And we will work with John.
We'll see. That's right.
Yeah, we will work with John to design. What would be in his experience, what would be the optimal design plan? Because that's his area of expertise in the field of appreciative inquiry. I want to just really kind of defer to his expertise and help us create that integration. So third item, I know we've got 2 minutes. Do you still have like perhaps 5 or 10 minutes where we can just kind of talk about Dill? I can pause this.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to pause.
Hi.
He just woke up. You can imagine what it's like for a teenager to just wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning.
If your hair looks that good when you just wake up, you're a lucky guy.
Yeah.
How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, doing well. Happy to be in this conversation.
How about you?
I watched your video, Dill, the other day, the one that you did, that your dad was telling me about. It was amazing. That was fantastic. Thanks for sharing all those thoughts. It's great.
Thank you.
So we're here to just talk about really high level next steps for the team chapter. I would defer to both of you to just share some high level framing of this. So I can help support Dill to serve at his best, and Dill's going to actually be doing a lot of this himself, and I'll be in the background, helping. But I think he's going to, with what he's going through in this awakening conscious leadership experience, with what he's going to be learning about the choreography of a appreciative inquiry, and the community support you're going to have a lot of support to make this an exceptional learning experience, and actually people will be just blessed by your presence. other teams would be just blessed by your presence because you had an impact. I mean, that video you shared not only saved lives, I mean, it touched lives. It didn't only touch lives of other teenagers, it may have saved lives. It may have saved lives.
So Dill, I think for the rest of December, it would be great for us to just start planning out what you want to do. And then come January 2021, we can hit the ground running with doing stuff. And so give ourselves the space and the opportunity to really talk and think about where this is going. And there's gonna be a lot more to it then, but I think the first step would be for you to take lead on putting a 1 or 2 pager together that explains what your vision is for this teen, what you're calling the teen chapter, maybe it's a teen branch or just a teen initiative, whatever it is for conscious capitalism. Just, you know, ask yourself and literally write out 1 year from now at the end of 2021, what do you hope this looks like? How will you know if it's successful? 5 years from now, what would you dream it looks like? And what are going to be the things that need to be done to get there? What support do you need? Who else would you need for it? Do you have anyone else that you think would be great to bring in? And just get really creative and don't hold yourself back with any constraints on this right now. Just envision it. Just think about what this could be, put it on paper, and let's start talking and going back and forth on it to iterate it so that we have a direction to go in and can then work together to bring this dream to life.
That sounds perfect.
Well, I would like to add why that was perfect. I want to add why that was perfect. That was a moment of perfection on so many levels. Because Alexander, you didn't come up with a plan for him. What you did in your conscious leadership was you actually deferred and you said, I'd like to actually invite you to come up with a plan. You let him take ownership. Your conscious leadership allowed, you know, many other leaders at this time would be actually telling kids, teenagers, this is what we need you to do, X, Y, Z. Your response came from a different place. I mean, this is an example of your extraordinary conscious leadership. You said, well, let me hear about your vision. I mean, that was a moment of perfection. So I wanted to just call out how just perfect that moment was.
I appreciate that. It is what it is. It's the best way to do this. And I'm really excited to see what your vision is, Dill, and for us to talk about it and figure out how we then bring this to life.
Well, that's magical. What a rich and magical conversation this morning has been. So I just want to, I feel so blessed. I feel so blessed. Well, I feel blessed to have Bill as his son. I know, it's just there. And I feel Abby, and Alexander, I feel so blessed for our relationship. And this is a relationship based in, you know, we are in this relationship and it's not a transaction. You know, relationships work best we're in a cycle of receiving and giving love with each other. And that's what I feel we've done all throughout the call. We've modeled that. And we've lived loving relationships. And you know, part of conscious capitalism, a lot of it is about humanizing organizations. And so many organizations are machines in which you get in meetings like this, and you get transactional and you get to a checklist. But I think what we've just experienced together is kind of what a relationship, what it looks like in a humanized organization, which conscious capitalism is doing the work of humanizing organizations. And the main purpose of any meeting is to advance relationships within which work gets done. And I feel so blessed that we've advanced this network of relationships between the four of us, and actually a larger network out there in this understanding. And I'm mindful that you may be watching and you may be inspired. And if this inspires you to actually engage in your relationships more deeply, to actually serve as the foundation for the work that you're doing, then I think we've actually had success on all levels today. Lots of love to
Thank you, Danny.
all.
Thank you,
Thank
Danny.
you. Looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Bye.